I am Corey Shapiro. I'm a divorce attorney in New York City, and I'm on a mission to help people become more creative and less reactive in their divorce. And helping me on that mission today is Sonia Weisshappel, a professional organizer. She's nicknamed the Chaos Whisperer. We're going to find out what that means. Welcome, Sonia, to the conversation.
I am so honored to be here, Corey, and I'm grateful. So thank you very much for allowing me to share time.
Yes, Sonia just finished, bringing out to the world this wonderful book. It's a memoir of her experiences. It's called Confessions of a Chaos Whisperer, My Life as an Organizing Guru, Business Owner, and Mom. And she's been a business owner. I think this is your quarter century at Seriatim. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. It's 25-year anniversary.
Yeah. So 25 years in the trenches in New York City, and I think other areas as well. So she knows what she's talking about. But before we get into what I want to talk to her about, which is a discussion about how we can bring her expertise into the world of divorce, let's ask her a little bit about her book. First of all, when she starts her book, she starts off with this such a interesting quote from Pema Chodron on Tonglen, I think, which is a mediation practice. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's a lot of development, spiritual development, to start that book with a quote like that.
I think the most important thing is that from birth to death is a journey, obviously. And no one wishes for a crisis to happen, but milestones are crises in their own way, even if they're happy. Like getting married can be a very happy event. Having a kid can be a very happy event. But there's also a lot of change that happens. Getting divorced, not so happy of event for typically one person at least. And each change requires a lot of reshuffling of priorities. And that to me is what that quote talks about.
Yeah. I mean, I think she does a lot of work in that area of trauma and stuff like that. So I think it's really wonderful.
And also, I maybe I said that in what I just said, but I feel like there needs to be an understanding from society as a whole that this is just normal. And you can choose to have it as adversarial and as upsetting as you want. Or you can choose to try to do the best you possibly can in it and to not make it worse. And that is what your belief is. That's what my belief is. But we just come at it from a different industry, so to speak. But we're still dealing with the same person who's having trauma.
Yeah. All right. Well, my favorite chapter in your book, obviously, was, I believe it was chapter 12. That's when you talk about the divorce chapter. I really enjoyed it. I loved the subtitle because I was like, oh, that's pretty good. It's From Concealment. And I probably took it a little differently than you take it, Sonia. From concealment, which hiding assets, to
Right.
Clarity. Maybe concealment, what you were thinking of is just all this stuff that's overwhelming people, and how do you find out clarity? But I really thought that was really wonderful. And I really enjoyed your truthfulness, I think, in your experiences and in your journey. So, all right. So let's get going into something basic. I'll start with a softball. It's Friday in the summer, Sonia. I'm not going to put you on the hot seat immediately.
Okay,
so
perfect.
First of all, what is a professional organizer? From people who are listening who are, maybe, probably thinking about divorce or in a divorce. First of all, what is a professional organizer? I would think most people haven't used a professional organizer. And why would I need one in a divorce?
So professional organizer, there's an association across the country called NAPO and NAPO, and professional organizers typically are registered there. That's some of our credentials, but they go into people's lives, whether it's their personal life or their business life. They go into people's lives and they help them with tangible assets. Why you need an organizer at the time of the divorce is not only are you dealing with the emotions of a divorce? You're dealing with the finances of the divorce. The third category tends to be tangible assets. I get the teapot, you get the car. I get the, chair, you get the sofa. Whatever, it might be. There's those three categories from my experience. And we don't deal with the mental. We support the mental and the financial by giving peace of mind and taking some of the burden of dealing with the tangible assets off of someone's plate.
Yeah. Well, I was in your book, you use the term objects. Is it objects or tangible? Like, what word do you use for possessions?
It's ubiquitous. I think asset, item, object are all the same.
Yeah.
Tangible asset, when I'm talking to a trusted advisor like yourself in the divorce industry, it's more important to consider it as a tangible asset because it's a trade on the balance sheet in the divorce. Right. And in an estate, it's the tangible assets for tax purposes and for equitable distribution amongst the heirs.
Yeah.
So they are objects, they are items, but in the financial aspect, to push those items into an acknowledgement that that's money on the table for most people.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting because as a divorce attorney, usually, what we call personal property or personality or objects or tangible objects or possessions are not really the focus unless you're in one of those type of divorces where they would have a really, really, expensive item. Usually what we're focusing on first is like the marital residence, dividing the retirement accounts, dividing the investment accounts, dividing all
money.
that. And then when all that's divided, people are like, oh, what about this and that?
That's where the fights begin, though.
Yeah, that's so true. After you fight over the big stuff, and then you're fighting over the smaller stuff. Yes, because things, as you well know, and which we'll get into, have emotional value.
But also in that mental journey, if it's mental, financial, and tangible assets, if you've done the mental part of like, oh, I really am getting divorced, this is a life change and all the, feelings around that. Then you get into the dividing up of the assets, the home and the investments. Your final piece being the tangible assets. If you are a fighter and you really want to piss someone off, look at Tiger Woods and his wife beating his car up with his golf clubs. She didn't choose a hammer. She chose the golf clubs, which was what would really get him, So it's like those assets are your final piece before it's real. And some people kick and scream and they use them as little knives.
Yeah. I would think, I mean, I don't really know. I'm just looking at it. I mean, Tiger Woods really did some bad things there. And it seemed like his wife, at least from the outside, seemed like to be like a homemaker, a good parent. And I think is she European? In my experiences, it's more indirect communication, So that was a very interesting way of indirectly communicating to him exactly how she felt.
Yeah, that went viral. Yeah. But I thought it was ironic.
Say again?
I thought it was ironic.
Because
one, she really chose to use his work tool to show the world how pissed she was at that moment.
Yeah. No,
she
totally.
Could have used a hammer. She could have used a crowbar. No.
Yeah. You got to be careful when you betray your spouse like that. That's hard. That's a hard divorce. All right. Well, luckily we don't have to worry about that divorce. That's a long time ago.
You're going for nice.
Yeah. We're trying to go, or at least well, let's think of this. I was thinking there's two populations that I want to focus on this conversation. And the first population, I want to call them planners. The people that want the divorce, the people who are thinking about the divorce, the people that could really organize without time pressure. And I want to start with that because I think they could probably do the most work. But then I'm not going to forget about the people who I'm going to call the surprised, the people who are served. I actually had a case where someone, their spouse told them they wanted a divorce the day after Thanksgiving when the whole family was still in, like the extended family was in their home. Talk about being surprised. So we have that gamut. And then we people have 5 years even before they actually file for divorce or starting planning. Yes. I know you are out there planning for divorce.
And those are our customers. I like those too.
Okay. Well, let's talk to those people, the planners. What advice are you going to give these people who are starting the process? They're not going to do anything now because everything has to be lined up perfectly before they're going to pull the trigger. But what would they do dealing with these tangible items that you're talking about? How can they make this process easier for them?
I think it's looking around their home or homes, their office, if it's a family business, all of the places that they have items, and to become familiar with what's there and to start to make lists of big to small. So, I'm in my office. I have the biggest piece of furniture is a sofa and a chair and then a piece of art. So you make a list of what it is. And then it's like, is it premarital or was it purchased in the marriage?
Yeah.
And so that's the literal, tangible asset, equitable, if you're in New York, kind of like how to negotiate. But then there's the emotional piece. Who cares about it? And so just making the list of things in your life that were premarital, because those should come off the table.
Yeah, no, good. I mean, good point. And sometimes those things get lost in the shuffle because you might not have the actual proof if they dispute it, if it is separate. So it is nice to inventory it and to maybe have some proof to show that if it is contested, this was actually mine, especially if it has more than emotional value.
Right. And that would be not only making a list, but taking a photograph of it. And when you don't know the value of it, one of the planning aspects of turning that item into a tangible asset is to actually have things appraised, to know what they're worth, because we've seen, Seriatim has seen, people make divisions of assets without knowing the values of it, and they're making an unfair trade necessarily. So if they can't agree and they have a $10,000 item, let's say, and then $5,000 for each person. But if someone wants it, you're paying them off that money potentially. So you need to know that item is actually worth 10,000 and not worth 1,000. Like, why are you buying it without knowing what it's really worth? That happens all the time.
Yeah, we're talking about super duper pre-planners. I mean, if someone just does the inventory, I think that's probably top of the class, right? But if someone's actually going to take the next step and get something appraised, I have to say, no one has ever come to me, Sonia, who's done that, who says like, here's my assets and I've had everything appraised. So that would be a super duper pre-planner. I would say sometimes on the bigger assets, they might have values, but not on the smaller items.
But they often have values of what they paid for it, not what, if they were to sell it today, what the fair market value would be.
Oh, so true. Like an insurance, right? Getting replacement value versus what it's worth.
And so for those planners, which we hope most will be, for those planners to, even if you decide not to divorce, to know what you own, to have it properly insured so that it is protected from fire, flood, burglary on your insurance the right way. That's a gold star planner also.
Yeah, no, that's some really good stuff. Okay, so we have the list, we inventoried it, we know we might have appraised it. We also know what the emotional value, who's this item more important to. Is there any other information you would give to the planner to help them make this process easier?
No, I think that would be really gold stars,
Go
like
start.
A plus.
And how long is this process? How long do you think that would take, just in general terms, that people should maybe estimate for that?
Well, it depends on the density of their surroundings. So sofa, chair, painting, chair I'm sitting on, computer in front of me. Okay, I'm done. 5 minutes. You know, if that's an Excel sheet and you 4 columns and you're kind of like mine, his, ours, no emotion, fine. But if you have multiple homes and garages full of boxes that you've never unpacked from prior moves, there's going to be some work there. And so there's taking stock of where you really are. How much do you know? And that's why I always say, do you know what you own? Because most people don't even know what they have. So how can you put it forth on an asset sheet or divide it without conflict if you don't even have a list of what you own?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I was just thinking about how organized that person would be if they did that. But I was also thinking about how challenging it is to start that process. But then you just gave me so much comfort where it might not be as bad as you think. But
No,
just starting that process is hard.
the mental piece is the hardest piece because by taking action, you're actually stepping into, I'm planning because the outcome of this really is something that you are playing the long game for.
Yeah. All right.
And you have to acknowledge that to yourself. And then I think it is a form of protection, regardless of why it's being done. And some people don't look at it that way until they've had a loss of a fire or a flood or a divorce or something where they got screwed in some ways.
I'm thinking of this conversation, what I usually have with prenups. I get a lot of call for prenups, and this is a lot of times a first time marriage. And there's usually a disconnect between the couple. That one couple is more sensible, more practical, more looking at the long game, the odds, and the other partner is more romantic and is in maybe denial. And the example that I have been taught is thinking about like wearing a seatbelt. Like if we were driving, me and you, Sonia, and you're like, I'm driving, and you put a seatbelt on, I wouldn't get offended. I wouldn't think we're going to crash, but we're just being proactive. And
Right.
I think doing all of this is very proactive, and it might be something in the best cases to do it together. That's what I was thinking.
Well, do it together, of course. I mean, if we're going to talk planning and we're going to talk prenups, how more definitive could you get than put into the prenup some form of inventory? His, hers, on record, marital assets worth more than $1,000 a pop.
Yep.
Or $500 a pop, whatever number, I mean, it's not like I have 10 pairs of shoes, or you don't need to go to that detail, but jewelry, furniture, art that you're bringing into the marriage, placing it on a prenup, that should be a baseline. That is ideal, because then if God forbid they want to get married or get divorced from their marriage, then you already have a list and you're only looking for what are marital assets. And then you're doing the same kind of snapshot and okay, how much is it worth? And who gets what is up to the lawyers to figure out the split.
I like this idea of, because I know a lot of people do the prenup and then they don't look at it for years, even decades. Right. And it's nice to have an update every so often. So I think these are great pieces of advice. One other thing I was thinking about, Sonia, is the detail, because I've done on some cases where, like, you could put photos, but then they sort of take the photos that are important to the other party, and then they just admit they don't, they say, I don't know whatever happened to those photos. And I think if you are going to have photos and you don't have digital backups or something like that back in the day, just make sure that you have copies, because I have seen people go really, just get so upset that they don't have photos from when the children were young.
If everything in your home or office is considered an object or an item, the division of that category falls into kind of furniture and art, jewelry, hundreds of categories of names of items. But then you have this whole other lump that's called paper. And now papers, both digital and actual papers, and within that are also photos. So it's almost a third category called memorabilia. It might be the wedding dress. It might be the baptism. It might be a yarmulke that was worn by the grandfather. It might be, heirlooms that are memory based, paperwork and objects. Those are the three piles of things. And when people divorce, you're absolutely right. Photos. I mean, we've had clients do silliness like, I'll take even years, you take odd years. Well, no one wins. You have an incomplete set for your child's history. That's not happy.
No, not at all. That's a good point you make. No one wins. And that's a lot of these situations. No one wins. So it's good we're trying to think about a win-win where everyone wins. So very good information. And I like that idea of memorabilia, because it's really something that lawyers don't focus on, only really emotional value. And that's how a lot of times people get back at each other, like Tiger Woods' wife with the golf clubs.
Right. But if you've done the mental and you've done the financial, it's only those tangible things, memories, paper, or assets. And someone's going to have a bad mood around something. They're going to find, and that's when that switch flips, it's lots of emails and lots of contention over what from the outside looks absolutely ridiculous. Why are we fighting over a teapot? Or why are we fighting over something that has no value? It becomes principle.
Yeah. And that's how you get sucked in to these what I'm going to call a derailed divorce, get sucked into these emotional dynamics, which is really hard to get out of. And I sympathize with people who are experiencing that. But
organizers are used to being amidst these emotional situations, because you're picking up a phone or maybe meeting someone at their home, but you're not actually opening and closing their closets or the garage or digging out the attic. And when you find the wedding cake topper from their marriage, it becomes an emotional moment when they're faced with a divorce or an estate, but in this case, a divorce, and they find something related to their wedding. You're going to see how they really feel. Are they going to throw it away? Or are they going to hand it to the other person? What are they going to do?
Yeah. What are they going to do? It's interesting.
You don't know.
So we have helped the planners. So thank you, Sonia, for helping the planners. Now that say you're in that other group, maybe in some ways the more unfortunate group, being surprised, especially if you don't want the divorce. If you're surprised and you want the divorce, maybe you'll look at that as a gift. But let's assume you don't want the divorce and you thought everything was okay. Maybe not the best marriage in the world, but it was okay. We've been together forever. I thought we're going to, end together. In those situations, if you had to give a surprised person maybe 3 tips, because they don't have all this time that the planner could do, what are the top 3 things they can do if they had a short amount of time? Assuming they can do this, because a lot of times they might be, still in grieving and very overwhelmed.
They need to stop and breathe. And they need to think about the chess game of what are the biggest assets that I need to protect for myself. Because often when someone leaves the home, they leave the home having taken things. And sometimes that could be the joint tax records. So the other person doesn't have them.
That happens often.
Right. I know. And so knowing that you have your contacts or knowing that you can get them again, you need your paperwork. You need to shore up where all your papers are. You need to shore up where all of the memories that you care about in physical form are. And then you need to start to look around and figure out what you care about in the home. What is, if you don't have that prenup with that inventory from the list, you're doing that work then, or you're hiring someone to do that work for you.
Yeah. I think that's a stark reality for someone who's surprised. And then they have to get into this business mode right away. And I have found that it's very challenging for a lot of these people to make that switch because they're still grieving. And grieving, as you know, could take a long time.
It's 9 months typically grieving. It's the same as when there's an estate. You're at the height of a pain of a loss of a loved one, and you have to perform. You have to do things to bring other people in and to make it happen. A divorce is no different. It's a huge loss, a huge kick to the belly, and you still have to function. And so, planning is so much better. But, if you're swiped and surprised, which is your point, it's, I would say, finding the paperwork, because the paperwork allows the lawyers to even begin the business aspect of what's happening. Yeah.
I think that's great advice, Sonia. Very good advice. And just focus on those big issues, focus on the financial side, focus on the, what's so important. You sort of reminded me of, I think I was back in the SATs when I was talking to this tutor and I was like, this SATs is just crazy. And like, you remember those SAT questions, which were just like a page long? Oh. Okay. It's like the opposite of your advice. Like those page long questions, just save to the end because they're going to knock out your time. So here it's the advice of deal with the big issues first and let's get things started on the business end. And then if we have time, then we'll get to the other items. But at least we can get going. And I think starting off, making sure you have those financial documents, that's so important in so many cases. All right, let's say, Sonia, someone is listening to this, probably like me, if I was going through it myself. And it's like, you know what? Okay, I'm not the planner, so that is not going to work. And I'm surprised. And I'm overwhelmed. And you might be a planner who's overwhelmed too. You might be a planner.
Of course. Trauma.
Yeah, you might be. Let's just say I'm overwhelmed. I'm not doing this by myself. Okay, I understand that these professional organizers are out there. What are some mistakes you see people make when they hire professional organizers? Just like I'm sure there's a lot of bad attorneys out there, there's probably, I'm assuming there's bad professional organizers. Maybe I'm wrong, but what are some mistakes you see people make hiring these organizers?
I don't know about mistakes. Yes, I think you need to hire based on experience. So someone always taught me of the triangle, and you either get time, money, or quality. And at any point, you can only have two. So if you have very little time, you're going to pay for it to get the quality. If you don't care about quality, then you have the time and the money. So you, in a true crisis, you need to go for someone who understands what's really happening, and that's experience. So organizers tend to list how many years they've been in business. And then if you have a really big project or there's a lot of things going on in a small bit of time, you might need an organizer company that has a team, because one person may not be able to able to do all that you need done in the short period of time. So I think it would be a mistake to hire an individual without experience when you have a big project that requires experience. It's that kind of mistake. And also hiring someone that you don't like or feel comfortable with. This is an intimate scenario of talking about your choices in your life and what you've surrounded yourself with. So if you can't communicate or don't feel comfortable, that would be a mistake too. For the
Sonia,
client journey.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I think that advice is probably for a lot of professionals. And I just think that's great advice. And if you really want to know how Sonia thinks, just like you see how she's organized even that thought into a triangle. But I'm gonna surprise you, Sonia. I was doing some research for this conversation, and I saw a YouTube video you did with Haas Regan, who I still think is with you. For I believe it was 9 years ago. First of all, who's posting on YouTube 9 years ago? That goes to show you, the pioneering mindset that Sonia has. But
is this the one with the fishing lures?
Yeah, I couldn't believe the organization that you did for your husband's fishing lures. That's all you have. I mean, the videos are short. There's just 3 minutes each. There's two of them. But just to show talk about, like, I don't even know what that's worth. If someone came into my house and I was having that problem and causing all that strife in the marriage, and then you figured this out, that's worth a lot, because I can't even imagine the dividends that you will give to these people. So I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful video that you guys did.
So thank you for that. That actually reminds me, we should probably post those differently again. But what that was, from a marriage point of view, was as a spouse to see something that brings utter joy to my husband, utter joy, but that was often covered up and hidden where it could fit in a closet or under a bed or in a, was discombobulating, and not being able to use or enjoy what gave him joy. So it was this needs to be displayed so that you can appreciate the fruits of your labor. And that to me is just organizing. But that was organizing something for my husband, who adores that. And everyone, most people have collections, but they hide them. or they don't display them in some way. And if you have a collection, why do you have a collection if you're not going to use it or take pleasure from it? So,
right. And if you do have a collection and you do want to display it, and it might be worthwhile just on that, if you're just thinking about this, just to show you what a person who has deep skill set in this area can do, because I think it was transformative. All right, listen, in your epilogue, you say, whenever possible, proactively plan and prepare. And I think that's what this podcast is about. This is what this conversation is about. That's what my book is about for divorce. That's what, Confessions of a Chaos Whisperer. It's gonna inspire you to think a little differently about this. And I hope bringing her expertise in organization blended with divorce is going to make you think that it may hurt a little. It may hurt a little to get started, even if you're a planner, but it's going to hurt a hell of a lot less if you wait. And I think that's what I'm getting from using some of your ideas. And
it goes back to the triangle.
Yeah, that's it. So I thank you for our conversation. And if you want to pick up her book, it is available everywhere, of course, on Amazon. And if you want to reach out to her company to learn, she does have a team of people. She's been in business for over 25 years. Check her out at Seriatim. And I'll have links in the show notes where you can find more about Sonia. Sonia, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
And a testament to you and I for remaining friends for most of these 25 years, so thank you for sharing your joy with me and others. So
it's been a pleasure. Thank you.